Hi, I'm Sonia Fay Stolfo. I am an out entrepreneur.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Pair here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. On this week's episode, we are welcoming Sonia Fay Stolfo, who is joining us here live in our Portland studio, so welcome.
Ooh.
Are you ready to inspire fellow Out Bosses, Sonia?
Gosh, I hope so. I'll try.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So just a little bit about Sonia before we jump into all of the amazing conversation. She identifies as a queer entrepreneur and has made Portland, Oregon, her adopted home for the past decade. Equipped with a degree in economics and several years of nonprofit experience, she hatched the idea to start the Afrikan Clothing Co, a social enterprise based in Kenya. The business is dedicated to producing custom-fit women's clothing while investing profits back into the community through projects that support young women and girls. This is awesome.
You said it better than me.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's my job. I condense a lot of complex, great stuff that you're doing into sound bites because that's what we do on podcasts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sonia, why don't you tell us a little bit more about this idea that hatched from your background doing economics, nonprofit experience. Sure. How did it start? Where are you now? Where are you going?
How did it start? It's kind of a long story, but I've told it a few times and I'm getting better at making it short. So I've been sort of like a Afrophile since I was a little kid. And I got to travel to East Africa in 2008 when I was a student at Lewis and Clark and studying economics. And I was really fascinated by the global economic systems that create and maintain oppression and the inequities and the greater economic system that we have. And I really saw myself just like trying to find a way to have an impact with my little tiny life, So I went to school for economics. I traveled to East Africa. I graduated, I started working for nonprofits, and I was just trying to find my way. Like, I really wanted to work for Bill Gates. And at the same time, I have this really artistic upbringing, and I'd sort of been neglecting that creative side for several years, and I was feeling more drawn to it and struggling with what that meant because it was so not part of my identity, but still part of me. And I was becoming more and more obsessed with fashion. And so I discovered this little niche that was being brought up by some diaspora, some really awesome creative people here in the United States of using wax prints to make awesome, really simple, classic silhouette types fashion. And I was like, okay, maybe I don't go back to school and go into more debt to go and compete with other people to do a job behind a computer that maybe somebody else could do better. Maybe there's something out there for me that I can create that only I would create, and it would be self-sustaining and it would make an impact. And that's where the idea came from. So I've been trying to figure out how to make it work. And I came up with a business model pretty quickly. It's really simple, just make money, give it back. I worked with a nonprofit called Africa Bridge right out of college here. It's based here in Portland, and they work in Tanzania. And what they do is they raise money, and then they go there and they spend time in a village. And they go by village until they've done a whole district, and then they go to another district. They meet with every single individual in the town, and they figure out what everybody thinks would actually move them forward. And that's where they start. And so I really liked that model, and I wanted it to be very much like just handing over money to the right people and letting them decide what initiatives are important. Yeah, so I really just wanted to focus on the fashion and then just have a really simple funding model. And so that's been really clear from the start. Some definitely tweaks have happened, but I've been on this journey with this company since I had the idea was probably 3 years ago, maybe more. But the thing that's taken the longest, really 100%, has been accepting that I'm the kind of person who can do this, and breaking down all of those blocks and learning lessons. Don't work with people who aren't 100% for you to work with, because there's other people that you're going to meet if you just keep looking, stuff like that. I've wasted so much time just doing things because I thought that I didn't have a better option or anything, because I'm not part of this world.
Yeah. It's clear that the culture when you were traveling to Kenya and Tanzania, were you also in Tanzania? So can you share a little bit of the countries that you visited when you're in East Africa and the influence that experience had on you to really come up with this vision of a business
Yeah.
And then talk a little bit
Totally.
also about like the relationships that you're building there to help with economic empowerment, because I know that's a big part of
Yes.
your broader vision of what you're doing.
So when I was there, one of the experiences that I had that I didn't really think of as significant while I was there was going to the flea market and shopping for really cool fabrics, and then taking those fabrics to somebody in the neighborhood where we were staying. We were staying in the slums, finding a tailor and telling her what I wanted and giving her my measurements and having her make something for me for so cheap. I mean, I was a very poor college student and I was able to do that. Obviously everything was really cheap. I mean, you can get lunch for 10 cents, but that was a really cool experience. And my sister travels frequently to Africa and does the same thing. And she's also really obsessed with African prints. And I think that you can do that in so many other countries, but that's something that isn't really a thing here in the States, at least in an economically accessible way. So I'm really excited to bring that experience here, especially because there's this huge workforce of experienced tailors who can do custom fit work. And the market for that has been threatened over the last few decades by the import of second and third and fourth and fifth hand goods from the United States. And so there's definitely an effort to try and build that market back up again. And this company is a little piece of that. And I think that that's not necessarily specific to Kenya. It's happening in a lot of countries, and all of the different economic influences that we have as Western states have had are definitely prevalent in all of sub-Saharan Africa. And so the long-term plan for our company is to actually expand to other countries and like have a different line for each different country we're in, but have the financial model be exactly the same. So that's not necessarily specific to Kenya, but it definitely is felt very strongly in Kenya. What I was doing there was I was learning like history and sociology and biology, not really primarily economics. I think I was the only economics student even on the trip. So I was sort of putting it together, but I'd already been taking all these classes about radical political economics and stuff. Yeah. So it was amazing. It was so amazing. It was like the coolest thing I'd ever done by far, being there. I got to go on safari, and like I said, I was like, I could never afford this stuff. So it was a really, really big privilege to be able to go there as a student. And I went back last year to go to Nairobi Fashion Week and meet more people. I'm still in touch with some of the people, though, that I met when I was there in 2008, including my Swahili instructor, who has helped me a lot and helped me make a lot of really great connections. So we're going to be setting up in Nakuru, actually. So I know a few people there. I know a landlord there who's going to help me find a spot, and I've connected with a whole bunch of different designers and tailors, and everybody I talk to there is like super excited. They're just like, when is it going to happen? They're just waiting. So
can you walk us through a little bit around the vision that you have, like where you're at now and getting funding for this business, what it looks like once you have the funding, you're in Kenya, you're building relationships, you're building jobs, and how you're giving back to different projects to support women and girls in the country.
Right. The model for that is really just going to be that we're going to have a foundation set up there, and the profits are going to go directly into the foundation. And then people who have been working for us for a certain amount of time, I haven't decided what that amount of time is yet, but essentially just get automatically elected to a board that decides where that funding is. So our local employees there who decide where it goes. And I definitely expect to play a big role in bringing projects in front of them. In the short term, though, we're going to have funding before we have that process fully set up. So the plan is just to work with one nonprofit and fund them directly for a little while until we have that set up and we can start funding more stuff.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you have your Swahili instructor who is in Kenya, right?
Yeah.
Are there other folks that you've built relationships there who are really helping shape just the structure of the business and just the mindfulness that you're having, that it's a social enterprise. So
right.
You're doing good in the world as you're building your own business. Like that's the idea.
Yeah.
Right?
Not so much, actually. Like the ideation process has been very much on my side of things and me observing other companies that are working mainly out of the United States. Like, Tom's Shoes is out of the United States, but they work in all over the world,
Yeah.
So I feel like here there's a lot of information about what you can do with a social enterprise. It's really not on people's mind nearly as much as it is here in Kenya. Like one person who I've been speaking to over there who's been really helpful and is one of the people who organized Nairobi Fashion Week. I was talking to him recently and he started telling me like all of the ways that he thinks I should set up the business. And I had to be like, that's not how I'm going to do it. I actually already have a plan, but thank you.
So do you have, for folks who are in Kenya right now, do you kind of have like a, not officially, but just kind of like a board, like a group of advisors, like when you're trying to turn to?
So I'm putting that together, sort of still finalizing it. I have a woman who lives here and has her own business where she travels to Kenya all the time and buys stuff and then brings it here and sells it. She's one of my people, a designer in Nairobi who has the like creative vision that matches mine. That person I was just talking about who has had a hand in organizing the Nairobi Fashion Week and knows a lot of people in the fashion industry there. Mark from here, and now I'm blanking on his last name, of course.
Mark Grimes.
Who I'm sure anybody who listens to this podcast has heard his name 100 times. He has been so helpful for me from the start. And like he hasn't even done that much, but he's listened to me and he believes in me, and that's so much.
Yeah. So let's talk about that belief in your idea. I mean, this is relatively new, right?
Yeah.
So kind of like, what was the moment where you had the idea? How long have you been kind of at it, getting that seed funding, and what really pushed you to take that leap? Because that's that can be a big mental block for a lot of people, especially folks who tune into the show who are thinking about getting started and for whatever reasons
it's a huge
they haven't.
leap.
Yeah.
And I'm about to really, I feel like step off the ledge.
Yeah.
Because so I would say about a year and a half ago, I started actually putting in a lot of time trying to get it funded. And the first plan was to do a crowdfunding campaign. Yeah. But in order to do crowdfunding campaign, I realized in order to do it successfully, needed to have product, and I wasn't there. I was going to need funding to make the funding. And so that's definitely been pushed back to maybe at some point as a growth strategy we'll do that. And now I'm just going for individual contributions. And it's taken a long time just because, partly just because I am doing too many things with my life. And as an entrepreneur, it's really hard to be full-time as an entrepreneur. You have to do other things. And I'm starting this other business. And so every time I think I'm about to recommit full-time to this, some deadline comes up for that one. And so and it's moving a little bit faster, and it's a smaller startup budget. So it's it's really taking up some of my time lately, but I'm getting there. And it takes making commitments, financial commitments, paying a pitch coach so that I have to do my pitch and stuff like that. It's it's really challenging. But yeah, like I said, I feel like I'm about to step off the ledge because I'm going to start a friends and family round of just capital investments on the smaller end starting on October 20th. And I do have a grant through Mercy Corps already, so I'm going to leverage that funding together. Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to leverage that funding together to go into my prototype phase, where I get to start working here with digital programming to make the custom designs with a laser cutter and test out the process and see how long it's going to take to make a garment using that technology and stuff like that. Yeah. And then I am going to launch an angel funding campaign where I go for larger amounts, and that'll be easier because I'll have more confidence. And that's kind of that strategy has just evolved in the last few months. Yeah. Whereas before I was just trying to psych myself up to go in front of people and be like, you should invest in me, even though I never owned a business before. And
we've had, and this is always so fascinating to me when folks are at the beginning of starting a business and it requires a good deal of resources on the front end of how people go about getting that funding. And we had a few folks from Gangels, so they're an LGBT specific investing angel investor firm, talking about that process on their end. What's some of the factors, the positives and the negatives? So you've mentioned, you weren't quite ready for crowdfunding because you need a product, so you're not there yet. But in terms of Mercy Corps is a nonprofit and they gave you a grant. So how did that work? Do they give grants to small businesses, or
yes, they have in Oregon, I think is the only place they operate in the United States in terms of actually providing support. And it's a really amazing program. It definitely just got cut back a lot, though, because of the present circumstances. And I was one of the last people in that group
that's
to
great.
get the full amount of funding. So it was like a really awesome, it's an IDEA grant. So it's one of those ones where you save up money and they give you a lot of money.
Yeah.
8-1. It was an 8-1 match when I joined.
Wow.
And now I think it's a 3 or 4-1 match.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an incredible program, and everybody there has been so enthusiastically supportive. It comes along with business classes and seminars and one-on-one time with like financial advisors and lawyers and stuff like that. And it's just a really incredible program. Super, super, super helpful for me.
I think that's helpful, and thanks for walking through that. Just because, as a reminder to listeners, there are so many resources that are available. We're here in Portland, Oregon, so we're talking about something that's pretty specific to the state of Oregon. And when you look around, you look at local chamber of commerces, or you look at groups like SCORE or the Small Business Administration. There's a lot of free resources that often go untapped.
Totally.
So it's always helpful when I hear guests kind of talk about the funding aspects and just getting started. Right now, things are still moving. You've got other kind of entrepreneurial pursuits happening right now, but with this business in particular, what has you most inspired and hopeful about its potential to grow?
Well, there's a lot of things. Inspired specifically about its potential to grow, though, like every single time I see another innovative product on the market that's doing something to like have less impact on the environment and still create a product, or, like whatever it is, have a social impact and create a product. Every time, the frequency that I see new companies doing cool things is increasing all the time, and that is in itself just like a buzz that is really exciting. I really think that consumers are becoming more aware of their power to persuade like how markets work. And not only that, but like there's just this huge educational component I think that's missing, that as companies we are responsible for putting out there, that like this is what you have been supporting and you don't know it, and so it's not your fault, but you are responsible for changing it, because most people have no idea how detrimental the fashion industry is. And it's such a huge global industry, and it's really, really wreaking havoc on not just our environment, but communities of humans, that are just diseased because people are pouring millions of gallons of dye into rivers and stuff. So it's a very, very messed up industry. I'm really excited to tear it open and
you're going to disrupt
and do my own thing.
That's
good.
That's good.
But I will say, I think on a daily basis, one of the things that inspires me to keep going is something that has surprised me, and that is other people's mediocrity. Like, I've had so many doubts about my own abilities to do things, and every time I see somebody else's piece of work that has a bunch of spelling mistakes in it, or like just somebody just not doing what I would do, and then I'm like, oh my God, maybe I actually know something, It feels really good.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of sounds mean, but like that's how I get there, That's how I get over my own insecurities. It's just like, wow, like I think it's a female thing, honestly. We're taught to like do everything perfectly, and if we don't do it perfectly, it doesn't count.
Yeah.
Whereas in the business world, there's like all these straight white guys walking around all the time doing like whatever, and then getting patted on the back for it. And I'm just realizing that, like, the more and more work I do, the more I realize, like, oh, you don't have to do anything perfectly. You just have to do it.
Yeah. I think it's like 90% of success is showing up and doing the work, right? And you're totally right too. Like different levels of scrutiny based off of gender, based off of race, class, it gets compounded the more that you aren't a part of a dominant group of people, right?
Yeah.
So I want to definitely jump into talking more about identity and how it shows up in your business. And I want to take a quick break and thank our sponsors. Hey, Out Bosses, Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBT entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business. To know that you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting business. In fact, I'm on a mission to empower leaders just like you and those on their way to joining us to cultivate cultures of belonging. In my upcoming book, Belonging at Work, I share some of my personal struggles of coming out as a trans guy in the workplace and how I leverage this experience as one of my business superpowers. Now, I'm on a mission to support you in taking simple actions that will make a world of difference for anyone who has ever felt as if they needed to hide important aspects of themselves on the job. When you commit to purchasing a special, limited edition copy of the book, a portion of your purchase will support expanding workplace opportunities for fellow transgender and non-binary people. An added bonus, your story about what it means to belong at work will be featured on the book's website to inspire others. You're ready to belong at work now. To learn more, visit Rhodes on Amazon.com or text 444-999 and type the word belong. Again, that's Rhodes on Amazon.com or text 444-999 and type belong. Okay, Sonia, so this is my favorite part of the interview. This is the Out Entrepreneur. So we get to talk about how your LGBTQ identity, however you identify under the rainbow, shows up in your business in the workplace. And I like to start first with just, it's not always easy to show up authentically as who we are, to talk about our families, to talk about who we are. And so I'm curious for you if you could think of a time where you may have felt like you had to censor or veil certain parts of your sexual orientation or your gender identity, gender expression, because you might have been afraid of losing a client, or in this case, maybe kind of turning off someone who would be interested in funding your business. And if you can think of something really specific, just kind of share what was going on for you and how you might have been able to work around it, or reflections kind of looking back.
I don't really have any specific anecdotes. You and I talked about this when we originally talked about me coming on the show, because I was like, I would love to be on your show, but I am not completely out. I'm obviously very much out in my personal life and in my business life in Portland. But my business is also being set up in a country where it's literally not even legal to be who I am. So to everybody who I communicate with there, I'm very careful about it. And I think I've told one person in Kenya, but she doesn't have anything to do with my business. And she knows not to tell anybody who knows anything about my business. And that is definitely challenging. When I first started thinking about this business, I was single, and that was very convenient because it was easy for me to think about uprooting my life and moving there. Now it's kind of a point of contention because I guess I'll call her my fiance, because at some point we're probably going to do that whole marriage thing. But she wants to be able to visit me there, but she doesn't feel like she can. And I'm not very, quote unquote, gay presenting. Most straight people don't identify me as gay. I feel safe there. As long as I'm not like touching somebody's butt or something, I feel safe there. But for her, it's a different story. And I think that people wouldn't even understand what she is a lot of the time if they saw her. And so we're trying to figure out what that's going to look like. And I'm not going to be living there full time. So it might just end up be that I don't get to see her when I'm there. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, I don't feel like I can even I want to publicize this interview, but I can't really.
Yeah. So walk us through some of those factors, because this is real for so many of us, where we may be implicitly out. Some of us, like, I'm totally publicly out. And then at the same time, I'm trans, I'm bisexual. There's certain contexts where it's just not safe. Or it's not something that you lead with, right? Yeah. And so for our listeners, what are some of the factors for you? I mean, this is a passion of yours. I mean, it's clear just the way that you're talking about your business. And so there's some of the culture gaps of, you're in a bubble here in Portland, Oregon, very out, in your personal life. What's your plan to really take care of yourself and to take care of your business? Be authentic.
Yeah. I think that the most challenging thing for me is just knowing that I'm in a place where I feel safe. The reason I feel safe there is because most violence towards homosexuals or non-conforming people is within the extended family, at least in Kenya, in most sub-Saharan African countries, in most developing countries or countries where it's not okay. It tends to be somebody who stands to lose something from you being gay that will attack you. That's why I say I feel safe there, because I don't have family there, and people aren't even necessarily going to find that out about me because I'm there on business. Whereas people who I'm surrounded with, I can't even know who I'm working with that's also queer, because they wouldn't tell me, they wouldn't tell anybody in their life. And that breaks my heart.
Yeah. Do you think that of what you know of your experiences of working in Kenya, that with the world and where it's at now, and where we hope, it will be, 30 years from now, do you see maybe things changing for you, for your business, and maybe the role of your business and kind of helping with that shift?
Yeah, this business, I call this business my starter business. I really can't wait to get to the point where I've hired a whole bunch of people who can run it without me because they're better than me at all of the aspects of it. And I want to just be, at that point, like a board of advisors person and just start doing other things. And I'm really interested in all of the different kinds of innovative ways that we can use business to change our social lives. Yeah. So who knows what will happen for me personally, but I will say that I think one of the sort of guiding values that is shaping what this business turns out to be is this belief in connecting people. I was just thinking about this morning because of all this political stuff that's going on right now. It's like some of the things that other people say about our politics on social media or the news, I hear it and I'm like, who are you? Like, how are we supposed to be citizens of the same country? Because we don't know each other. We don't know each other. And I think that creating more connections, like real connections that aren't just sound bites or, like fake news, or creating more and more connections between real people and across borders too is really like the way forward in my mind.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we're about. We're
absolutely.
I get frustrated because sometimes when I bring up what I'm doing, people are like, oh my God, so Kenya, that's like in South Africa, right? And I have to be like, South Africa is another country.
Yes.
So, there's this whole like lack of understanding of the African continent, and they call it the dark continent for a reason. And so that's a big part of what I want to do with this business is like give an identity to different regions of Africa and have people in the Western world like actually comprehend that and stop thinking of it as like this place they don't know anything about and like whatever kind of crazy concepts that they have about it.
Right. And I think that goes back to this concept of empathy gap, which I don't know if I brought it up on the show before, but it's just this idea that it's really easy to dehumanize or other groups of people that you've never had any contact with. Exactly. So, to kind of assume that an entire continent is a country or whatever, like pops up. It's
it's oh my gosh, Africa, that seems like such a cool country. That I get that one a lot too.
Yeah, it's just that lack of education, understanding, exposure, cross-cultural engagement. So I think like with your business, that's something that's delivering, pieces of at least Kenyan culture for right now until you expand further to the United States and vice versa. And just kind of like on the LGBT pieces, just from what I know from my own experience, like 10 years ago, less than 8% of people knew someone or worked with someone who's trans, right? And fortunately, that percent has doubled, but it's still really low. So, in the United States, it makes a lot of sense, although it's very upsetting to me and folks within my community where it's, our basic rights are put up on ballots because it's easy to dehumanize because most people still don't know someone who is within at least trans communities. And that's on us to kind of, when we feel safe and we have the opportunity just to share more about who we are, what our businesses do, and just trying to break down what feels like separation when in reality we share so much more in common than we have differences, right?
The operative word, though, being, when we feel safe, because that's the problem. It's kind of on us to like reach out and be vulnerable, but it shouldn't be. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, it just goes back to the question of, coming out is not this static process, and it's a constant evaluation of what's in the environment right now, what are the benefits of sharing and being vulnerable and like what's at stake to be lost. And that's very real in our businesses, right? Where, this is our livelihood, so I think that having you on the show is really interesting because you are based here in Portland and you're doing business internationally, and that changes the game completely. And the kind of the role that we play as business owners in a global community,
I will say it's really interesting. I feel like being queer doesn't really affect my relationships in business because, like I said, I'm not really that quote unquote queer presenting. it's like everything else about me that blocks people from being able to accept me as somebody who's saying what I'm saying. Like, I'm very small and petite and feminine, and like, I don't know what it is, but I all the time like have a really hard time getting people to take me seriously. And then when I'm over there, they just see me as a white person, and like, that's great.
Yeah. So it's
yeah, I'll talk to you.
It's the complexity of like when you have privileges and when you don't, when you have disadvantages, and it, because we're complicated, you know, we're not a monolith of like any one identity. That also shifts with the environment. And to be a woman in business globally in the United States, you know, you're running up against these barriers of like, oh, we weren't expecting to meet a woman, or we weren't expecting to meet someone so small.
Or like, let me tell you everything about what you're describing to me.
You're like, wait,
that's
this
what's
is my
frustrating.
business.
But I've learned to just be like, oh, you know what? I don't have to talk to you because you're just going to try and explain it to me, and I don't need that.
Totally. And then it, then it goes back to, you know, you're attracting ideally dream clients, dream staff. Like you're putting your message out, and hopefully like is attracting like, or at least people that really believe, like folks like Mark and other folks in your world, in what you're trying to do. That's great, because you can move beyond the people that are telling you or explaining to you like what it is that you're trying to do in the world. Yeah,
that's my like most serious advice to anything as an entrepreneur, is like totally ignore the people who don't make you feel comfortable talking to them about what you're doing. You don't have to do that. Right. If you don't feel comfortable being yourself and talking about what you're doing, then you're not talking to the right person.
Yeah, and that's your intuition, you know, that you feel it in your gut, you know, wherever you feel it in your body. If it doesn't feel good, it's like that's really important information that you should be in tune with. Okay, so that's probably the hardest question of the interview, and it's tricky. So thank you for being so honest on, you know, your lived experiences of being a queer woman in the world. Mm-hmm. Do you see those experiences as helping you have a competitive advantage as a business owner? Do you see them as kind of superpowers in what you're trying to do? And if so, what are they, and how do you leverage them?
Absolutely. I think that being a queer person is to live outside of what society expects of you. And so once you realize that you can break that rule, you kind of just realize that all the rules are fake. And I think that that's helped me a lot in business, because I refuse to accept the status quo.
Yeah.
And whenever people tell me, oh, you want to do it that way, you can't do that, I'm like, well, I'm going to talk to somebody else about it.
Right. And doesn't it give you courage where it's like I'll just speak from my own experience, like being a kid, like a young kid, where it's like, all right, there's something up with my gender, there's something up with my sexual orientation. I don't really have a model, but I'm going to kind of trust myself that who I am is who I am. Yeah. Doesn't that just give you that extra confidence when you're starting something new, like a business or moving across the country, moving across the world, you know, where it's this, it puts it in perspective where it's like, I've been here before.
Yes. I mean, but I do have to put one caveat, which is that I am extremely privileged. I hardly even had to come out to my family. You know, I just told them I had a girlfriend, and they were like, cool. So that's my background. I don't feel like being queer has been a really big challenge in my own personal life. So I think I can see how that is like, for you, something that would give you a ton of confidence. But I think for me, it just gives me more confidence to like ask questions. Like it starts with going from your sexuality. For me, starts from going from your sexuality to examining all of the ways that you set expectations for your relationships based on what other people say your relationship should look like, and then asking like what you actually want your relationships to look like, and asking what's possible in relationships. And then you realize that there's like so much liquidity in all of your relationships, and all of the ways that you identify, and all of the things that you decide are your limitations. And so it comes from there, and then it kind of goes out, you know, and I think that can apply to the way that we shop. And like, people need to understand, you don't have to buy the first product you see, and you don't have to buy the thing that's cheap. You can buy the thing that's more expensive, and it might last you way longer than the thing that was cheap.
Yeah. I mean, it's that having that intentionality, both in how you're living your life and what you want your business to be, where you choose to spend your money. I mean, that's being self-actualized. And I think that from guests like yourself and from other folks that I've interviewed, that's a theme that I see again and again, for folks within the LGBT community is, for a lot of us, we have really been questioned in who we are in the world. And we know that. We're very, very clear. And that adds to that self-actualization of just being so intentional and different in other aspects in life. Yeah. To be that architect of your life, your business, where you want to be 5 years from now, just having those visions and executing on them, not just being like, oh, here's what I hope to have in the world.
Executing on them is the hard part.
Doing the work, right? It's doing the work, which I think is kind of a good segue for the next question, which is considering some of the challenges of being authentic, being out in business in different contexts, and also these superpowers. What would you want our listeners to take away to inspire them to be more authentic in their work? Whether they've already started their businesses, they're thinking about starting a business, they're working for someone else.
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. The only thing that I would say is that if you're motivated to be doing something and it feels right to you, then you're needed there. Like you specifically as an individual should bring all of yourself to that because there's a reason that you're there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right on. Kind of goes into what you were talking about in the beginning of like being nervous, like the imposter complex stuff of like, who am I to do this or lead it? And I think with that, definitely folks struggle. I mean, it's something that pops up for me all the time in business where I'm like, okay, no one is doing this. Maybe I should do it. You feel that intuition and you do it. And then halfway while you're doing the thing, it's like, oh my gosh, wait, what gives me that, that right to step into the space? And so I guess. Oh,
yeah. I mean, like, I also deal with this whole aspect, too, of cultural appropriation in terms of, like, am I supposed to be in this position? Yeah. So that's, like, a whole other conversation. But.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk about that because I think that might pop up for listeners to be like, okay, like, your connection to Kenya, how to give back. So what's the line of cultural homage, cultural appropriation? Right. I'm sure that pops up for you. And
to me, cultural appropriation is like prostitution and killing each other. It's something that we've been doing since we became humans. There's definitely more respectful ways of doing it, and there's definitely a lot of ways that large corporations have over and over and over and over again exploited cultures, and that's absolutely not what I'm trying to do. And I do want to be really careful all of the time because it's a hot issue, hot issue.
Totally.
And so people are ready to point fingers at people for cultural appropriation. And the only thing that I can do towards that is what I'm already planning on doing, which is really like lifting other people up and making them part of the story and not really making it about me, because it's not really about me.
Yeah. And
it's more about like buying the product from the actual people rather than like waiting for H&M to pick up on the trend and then paying them for it. That's what I'm about, is actually like trying to pick up on the rising interest in African culture and make it more authentic and make it so that people are benefiting from it who should be.
It seems like you have that model with the coffee industry, right? I mean, it's different, totally different, fashion, coffee, but when you think about fair trade, I mean, where do you see that in the fashion world? I mean, is there an equivalent to that? I'm not a fashionista. That's my disclaimer there. But
is there an equivalent to fair trade like coffee? No, I think that's the problem. I think that's what I'm trying to do. And that's kind of the reason that I chose the name Afrikan Clothing Company, because I wanted it kind of to be like a trading post, like a middleman almost. I mean, we're definitely going to be more involved because we have to make sure that there's consistency and quality in the product. But eventually, I really want it to be like a meeting place of cultures, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think that analogy, that's really interesting. And I wonder how, as you continue growing, how much that model in the kind of the coffee world might help, and just how you would structure it.
Yeah, like when you're like, oh, the Indonesia blend, or, like just putting a name on something that gives it more connection. I don't know how far that model goes because I feel like people still don't really know what country where they're buying their product. They know the name of it maybe, but they don't know where it is.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking
I want to be like able to bring more stories. And we'll definitely do that through our impact work. We'll be able to be like, look at this awesome like girl that just graduated schools and get get to do this because we gave her this money because you bought that thing.
Yeah.
And that's like a real connection that somebody will remember. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like both the social giving back to communities in Kenya and other countries that you'll have presence. And I'm thinking like a step before that is kind of the relationships that I know with like, the very responsible coffee roasting companies that are that exist, where they have the relationships with the farmers who are growing the beans.
Right.
And it sounds like
I know what you mean. Yeah, there's totally good intentions, and it's awesome that people are doing that kind of work in fair trade. I didn't mean to minimize it.
Oh no,
I was just talking about that like customer relationship with the like concept of where their thing is coming from.
Yeah. And you have the opportunity to do that, with the connections and relationships that you've established in Kenya. So, I mean, it's very interesting. It seems like there is a lot of potential to what you're doing, and you're just getting started. So it'll be fun to kind of reconnect and hear how this is developing, because it seems like there is a massive hole in the market. If you are trying to be an intentional consumer, I know I struggle with clothing in particular. It's just like, okay, like where do I get clothing where it's not directly negatively impacting people who are actually making
it's hard. We need to make it easier for consumers. We really do. Because it's so hard to be a conscious consumer.
Yeah. And I feel like in the 90s, there was a lot of activism, at least in the United States, around pushing back against large corporations, clothing companies. I'm not going to name any of them, just in terms of, the direct connection to sweatshops and just like the abysmal labor conditions there was a lot of scrutiny, and that's still happening now. And I don't see that level of activism. So,
it's a thing that I feel, especially living in Portland, because we have these huge, huge companies here, and it's like the conversation isn't happening at all.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So
and every time there's a tragedy and something falls down and a whole bunch of people die, it's like it becomes a conversation again for a week and then it's gone. But it's still millions of people's lives.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I would love to continue this conversation in particular. And so, we will definitely have you come back on the show. For right now, we are now going into our bonus round, where we'll have the chance to get to know Sonia just a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work. And then we can learn one way to stay in touch with Sonia after today's interview.
Yay.
Yes.
I'm nervous.
Okay, don't be.
Should I not be? Okay.
No, you know these answers. Well, maybe the first question is kind of hard. So finish the sentence. As a queer entrepreneur, I believe.
Yeah, that one is hard. I'm supposed to answer it fast. As a queer entrepreneur, I believe that I can do anything, and so can everybody.
I love it. Yeah, it's like expansive thinking, right?
Right.
Can you share one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
I've embraced the fact that I do really good work after midnight.
So you are a night owl.
I'm a night owl. I do really good work at night. And then during the day, I clean my house.
Wow. That's, when you're most creative, right?
Yeah.
That's so key, because people talk about time blocking. I need to work at X, in the morning or the afternoon, like your midnight to 3 a.m. Something, I don't know, 5 a.m.
I think it's because I worked nights for so long.
Got it. Yeah.
That's like when my body kicks in and I'm ready. My brain's on.
Yeah. My brother's totally like that. And I'm totally that. I'm just like, okay, 5 a.m. is when like the genius is going to happen. And then the afternoon is all emails. Name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
That's something that I am like learning to do for sure. Data processing is the first thing that comes to mind, because that's the last thing that I delegated, and it was such a good decision.
Yeah.
Just things that take time that I don't want to do because I know they take time.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that you're getting into that discipline now, as you're kind of like early on in your entrepreneurial career, that's going to set you up for success in the future. Just knowing that you don't have to do it all. And even the way that you were talking about how you want to grow your business, where it's like, eventually you're going to have people doing it all. You're going to hire a CEO. You're not going to have to be that person. So super smart. What are you most grateful for with being a business owner who is also a part of the LGBT community?
I'm grateful for everything. I feel like a very, very lucky person. I just feel grateful and lucky in general. I feel grateful to have been able to be myself my whole life, and to like have such ease with my own identity that it didn't ever really affect my ability to do other things.
Nice.
Yeah.
And can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
Yeah. The way that we define labor and the way that we define contribution is all changing. And I think that we're all really stuck in, not all of us, but a lot of us are really stuck in like antiquated ideas of what it means to be a successful person. And the more that you pick that apart and ask yourself what you really want in life, you know, like if that means starting your own business, then do it, not only because you should, but because there are more and more networks all the time out there to support you in doing it.
Yes.
And there's other people out there who are trying to do the same thing who you can talk to and find camaraderie with. And like, that's really key.
Yeah, that's great advice. So definitely if you have that business idea, that dream, research it, do your homework, and follow it, see where it goes, because it's, you know, the resources are there. And I think you're a great example of someone who's just getting started with a really good vision. And I'm excited to check back in with you in a couple of months or in a year or so and see where you're at.
Thanks. And I really want you to get my girlfriend in here too, because she'd be a good person to interview.
Okay. All right. I'm always up for anyone listening.
I'll introduce you guys.
Have a good pitch. You have someone good for the show. I'm always open. So, so Sonia, thank you so much for your time and for inspiring fellow out bosses. Before we go, can you share just one way that we can stay in touch with you to learn more about your business?
One way.
One way.
I actually would say go to my website and sign up for my newsletter, because I'm not going to send you very many emails. I'll literally like send you a survey about what you want to know, if you're interested in the investor track or if you're waiting for product or whatever. And then I will only send you updates about that.
I love it.
And that's the best way, I would say. I'm also on Instagram though. So my website is Afrikan Clothing, African spelled with a K, and then it's .co as in company, not .com.
Got it. And we will have that in the show notes. So it'll be super easy to find Sonia, her business, the newsletter with limited emails that are only helpful for what you want to learn. Always a good thing.
Always a good thing.
Okay, so Outbosses, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Sonia. For details from today's conversation, please check out the show notes. You can go to outentrepreneur.com. The easier way is to text OUTBOSS, that's all one word, to 444-999, and we will get you connected with the show. So as a next step, consider subscribing to the podcast, leave a rating and review in iTunes, and be sure to share the show with a friend or a loved one. And as always, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.